David Gross once said, quantum mechanics, general relativity, and reality. You can only have two of these at a time. This thought-provoking statement invites us to wonder, if we can only choose two, which of these might be the one to leave behind? Quantum mechanics, general relativity, or reality itself? Hello and welcome to Mr.Logicman's channel. This channel is created with the sole purpose of raising awareness, sharing scientific knowledge, and researching scientific topics. Everything that is said and discussed here is entirely based on reason and logic, because reason is humanity's greatest asset and what distinguishes us from other beings. I also apologize in advance for not having the perfect accent and possibly mispronouncing some words. I hope the interesting nature of the topics helps overlook any mistakes in pronunciation. Throughout history, great thinkers have explored what we mean by reality, often suggesting it may not be as independent or objective as we believe. Let's take a look at what some of these philosophers have had to say. First, there was George Berkeley, an Irish philosopher of the 17th and 18th centuries. Berkeley argued that to be is to perceive, or in Latin, esse est percipi. In his view, objects exist only within the mind. Without an observer, there is no reality. The world, as Berkeley saw it, was ultimately a collection of perceptions held within the mind of both human beings and ultimately God. Then, in the 18th century, Immanuel Kant took Berkeley's idea further. Kant suggested that reality is not only perceived but actively shaped by the mind. He believed that we cannot access the thing in itself or nomenon, but experience only phenomena, what appears to us, filtered through the frameworks within our minds, like space and time. In Kant's view, everything we experience is partly a product of how our minds are structured. A bit later, Johann Gottlieb Fichte, a German idealist, claimed that reality itself springs from the self. For Fichte, the external world is a mental construct created by the mind. Everything we experience is in fact a product of the self's inner activity. Arthur Schopenhauer in the 19th century advanced a new view with his philosophy of will and representation. Schopenhauer argued that external reality is an image within our minds shaped by our desires and intentions. Reality, he claimed, is essentially the mind interpreting the will as phenomena we perceive. As we enter the same century, William James brought a new perspective through his philosophy of pragmatism. He suggested that reality and truth are subjective, grounded in practical outcomes rather than absolute concepts. For James, reality is tied to personal experience and how that experience influences our everyday lives. Similarly, Ernst Mach, a scientific empiricist, argued that science should focus only on sensory experience. To Mach, objective reality didn't exist independently for our sensory perceptions, which limits what we consider real to only what the mind experiences directly. In the early 20th century, pragmatists Charles Sanders Peirce and John Dewey shared similar ideas. They believed that truth and reality emerge through personal perceptions and actions, which each individual experience actively shaping what reality is for each person. Around this same time, Bertrand Russell, initially a realist, shifted to logical empiricism, ultimately concluding that reality is known only through experience and subjective observation. Finally, in the late 20th century, Ernst von Glasersfeld, a proponent of radical constructivism, held that knowledge and reality are structures built by the mind. In his view, there is no true objective reality. Rather, the world as we understand it is constructed by the human mind. Together, these philosophers suggest that reality is something subjective, existing within the mind and shaped by perception. Which leads us back to our main question. If we must choose between quantum mechanics, relativity, and reality, Could it be reality that's the most uncertain of the three? Or does this point to something even deeper to our search to understand the true nature of the world? These philosophers and scientists held that reality exists solely in the mind and perception of human beings, and that there is no independent, objective reality outside of the mind. Now, let us delve deeper into what is meant by mind and mental perceptions. Let's return to the central question and further explore the topic. What is reality? The physical world around us and everything we observe within it can be seen as a representation of reality. However, the primary question remains: what is the physical world composed of? Objects. Mountains, trees, birds, galaxies, stars, human, and all things visible and invisible in the material universe are composed of objects. Now, another question arises. What are these objects made of, and what is the primary characteristics shared by all of them? The common trait of all physical objects is that they possess dimensions. Dimension and object cannot be separated, though they differ in nature. They are inherently interdependent. An object without dimensions is inconceivable, and dimensions without an object cannot be imagined. So, what is the next question? What precisely are dimensions? Dimensions refer to the size of an object, and the object and its dimensions are inseparably linked and intertwined. As we know, physical objects have three primary dimensions: length, width, and height. The combination of these three dimensions forms volume. If we exclude height and focus solely on length and width, we are left with a surface. A surface consists of two dimensions, which are length and width. If we remove width as well, we are left with a line. A line is one-dimensional, possessing only length. The crux of the issue arises here. If we remove length, what do we have? A point. A point has no dimensions and represents the smallest unit that constitutes the world of objects, or more accurately, the physical world surrounding us. But what is a point? How can something exist in the physical world without any size or dimensions? This appears to contradict the very nature of physical reality. Let us examine the point more closely. Since a point lacks any dimensions, it in fact does not exist. Doubt it? Let's prove it. Draw a point on a piece of paper. Now, magnify it using a strong magnifying glass. Upon closer inspection, you will notice that the point, which initially seemed extremely small, appears more like a circle with both length and width. But as we mentioned, length and width are characteristics of a surface, and what we originally perceived as a point is in fact a very small surface, or more precisely and rigorously, it is a volume with a height measured in extremely small molecular scale dimension. Anything we regard as a point, if sufficiently magnified, will reveal dimensions. Thus, no true point exists. A point is an intellectual concept that, though essential to our understanding, we can confidently assert does not exist in physical reality. Let us now consider one dimension higher. A line, as previously mentioned, has only one dimension, which is length, and is formed by the combination of an infinite number of points. However, since a point is a hypothetical intellectual concept and has no physical existence, length, which arises from an infinite number of points, is also a hypothetical concept that cannot exist as a physical entity. It is in fact not real. It is a mathematical abstraction, necessary but non-existent in tangible reality. Now, let us introduce another dimension and examine the surface. A surface is composed of length and width. Width is formed by the combination of an infinite number of lines, each with a width equivalent to a point. However, since both points and lines do not have an external reality and are purely intellectual concepts, The surface, which arises from the combination of infinite lines, is likewise an unreal concept. We swiftly move past the surface and arrive at the core issue. Volume is created from an infinite number of surfaces, each with a height equivalent to a point. But since the point, line, and surface are not real, volume too cannot be real or physical. But how is this possible? Everything around us has volume and physical dimensions, and we can observe and touch them. Here, only one hypothesis stands. The physical reality surrounding us does not truly exist, and all that we perceive in the material world is merely an intellectual concept. Intellectual concepts are those which we deduce rationally, and while their existence is necessary for our understanding, they exist only in the realm of the mind, not in the physical world. Moreover, in the physical realm, there is no such thing as infinity. The concept of infinity exists only in mathematics and intellectual thoughts. This further supports the notion that lines formed by infinite points, surfaces formed by infinite lines, and volumes formed by infinite surfaces cannot exist in the physical world. They are all creations of the mind. This idea extends to time as well. Time, the measure of motion, consists of the past, present, and future. As we know, the past no longer exists. The future has not yet arrived, and only the present moment exists. But what precisely is the present? How long does it last? Just like the point in physical objects, the present is an intellectual concept and it does not have an external reality. But if the present does not truly exist, can we not say that this also holds true for time in the same way? Since time measures motion and is intricately linked to change and movement, it follows that neither motion nor change exists in a tangible sense. Ultimately, everything in the material world and the realm of possibility exists solely as intellectual concepts and does not possess a physical reality. At first glance, this may appear frightening or disorienting, but if we reflect more deeply, we realize that if everything in the world is merely a product of our minds, then it is we who confer reality upon the world around us, clothing it in the garb of truth and presence. Everything that exists, we create and shape. Not only our inner states, such as anxieties, worries, joys, and fears, are constructs of our minds, but the physical world around us is likewise shaped by our intellect. Likewise, time, being an abstract mental concept, supports this view as it reveals that since there is no past or future, it is we who create our past and future, and in doing so, we shape the realities of the world around us, transcending the boundaries of the present moment. But an essential question arises. If it is we who created the physical world around us, how did we come into existence? Wasn't the world already here before our presence, with the passage of billions of years from the Big Bang to the present, making human existence a mere fraction of that timeline? On first impression, this might seem illogical, but the answer lies in the fact that time is a mental construct. Thus, the past, future, and present all exist in one integrated whole in the human mind. It is humanity, through its intellect and imagination, that has created both the past and future, all objects and events, and the material world transcending the boundaries of time and space. In fact, it is humanity that, through the power of the mind, initiated the Big Bang, and through the theory of evolution, created its physical form, the single-celled organisms of the ocean's depth. The proof lies in the fact that anything we think about we bring into being. Imagine something and it will become real. As David Bohm stated, the reason we cannot pass through the physical object like a wall is because we fundamentally believe that the wall exists. If we believed otherwise, we would see that we could pass through it and alter the boundaries of reality. There is nothing that humanity cannot accomplish. Everything we can imagine can be translated into a physical, tangible reality. In fact, anything that arises in our imagination exists. Therefore, be mindful of your thoughts, because your thoughts created your reality, and the only thing that is truly real in you is your intellect and reasoning. The topic we have discussed today is a complex one, requiring deep contemplation and reflection. Never cease thinking, and always strive to examine and challenge everything around you with logic and reason. Question everything and never stop. What do you think? Do you believe that reality cannot exist and that the world around us is only a mental, intellectual construct? The next time you look at your hand or step on the ground, reflect upon the fact that not only your hand, but the every ground beneath you is an intellectual concept and has no physical reality, and that if you feel anchored to the earth, it is because you truly believe that a hand or ground exists. From now on, don't trust the ground beneath your feet too much, because it only exists in your mind and not in reality. Until the next challenge, farewell.